and myself. I'll sit here. You guys get all cozy over there. Day 27 and going. So this is the last panel on the last day, and we're going to have some fun. What we're not going to do is just back up the line. Let's mix it up. You guys feel free to talk to each other. You guys ask each other. Yeah. Everyone's got one? Cool.
Let's do this.
Yours. Robbie, why don't we first start just by a little bit of intro, but we'll keep it real quick. We've got very quickly, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I'm Clayton. Before that, I was at Figment for about 4 years, doing protocol strategy. I'm
Mitya, co-founder of Drop, liquid staking protocol for interchain, backed by.
Hi guys, Josie here, co-founder protocol for the Celestia token last year, and we have for the modular ecosystem. Lovely to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Hey everyone, I'm Vishal. Started as liquid staking protocol for Cosmos and modular blockchain. More to come. Before this, I first worked at Basis, which was a stablecoin project back in 2018. For that, and I've been in Stride for the last few years.
I'm a protocol specialist there. I was at Ledger validators in the space, in the restaking space as well as the liquid staking space. So very excited for this panel.
Awesome. There's going to be liquid staking, and then there's going to be restaking. Why don't we kind of just does anyone want to take a stab at, what is liquid staking? What is restaking? These are not as far as why they are not the same. What differentiates the two?
To think about staking and staking is validator token holder protocol, AVS selection. So the most important part is obviously there's unique things that you can do with spread is on risk and reward. It's pretty much similar across most.
Okay, awesome. So let's all of that, what that entails. Example of this is going to be Lido, who has amassed this really. Seb mentioned a really important question about not recreating the same monopolization in TradFi, and so almost monopolistic size that they have on stake. Do you guys see a problem that Lido has this much stake? Why or why not?
I guess I can. Talking of the numbers, so that I guess in Ethereum now, out of all the staking market, 40% is liquid staking, out of which 28% is Lido. So out of all the staking market in Ethereum, Lido is then around. Fair to say it's monopoly, really. But then I think when we talk about liquid staking protocols, you should look at the different levels, right? So there is a liquid staking protocol, but then there are also node operators that work with the liquid staking protocol. And yeah, I think we should look at what is the strategy that they're using to redistribute this. I think this is where decentralization actually can happen. So yeah, I think when you think about Lido, you should see, okay, like are they doing a lot to contribute to decentralization of the space when they deal with the node operators? And I think the answer is like clearly yes, they do a lot. They're pretty transparent about it. So I think from that perspective, I wouldn't really say this is like a having said that, I think everyone would be super happy to see more very strong liquid staking providers, restaking providers, just because it's healthy. And yeah, I hope that's what we.
Now, extending this into the restaking space, we have this amassment of call when it comes to restaking. Do we have to think about centralization in a similar way and try to decentralize the operator set as much as possible? For the restaking protocols up here, how are you decentralizing your operator set?
Am I the only restaking protocol right now?
No, I think we have Milky
I'll
Way
take it.
as well.
Okay. So for us, that's a great question. And so, and Symbiotic and a few of the others, they have what we internally call kind of an operator-centric model, which is exactly what we think of this like centralization or decentralization thing, right? Users, delegate to an operator and then of the operator set. So we're like, okay, maybe we can kind of like, flip it up a little bit just to decentralize it. So actually for Milky Way, for our restaking protocol, it's going to be very programmable, where the AVS can actually choose the operators that they want to be secured by. So secure, and then the AVSs then choose the operators that they want to then secure them. So it can be as centralized or as decentralized as they want it to be. So it can be like, okay, I'm gonna, open it up to, or they can have certain parameters where it's like, need to have certain self-stake or certain delegation amount. So it's going to be very programmable, because that's exactly what we think that like we shouldn't be the one defining the rules. It should be up to the AVS to define in terms of the decentralization how much of a risk appetite they have.
Yeah, I think compared to staking protocols, so generally that's going to lead into concentration because a lot of people do participate in systems in a passive way, and then aggregating capital into smaller group of vehicles is just like a natural thing that would happen in that regard as well. So how do we allow LRT vehicles changing the market dynamics itself? Because then you have to start making rules as a protocol that is like limiting how people can actually scale out their business models on chain.
Creating like more things like Swell and EtherFi and like kind of like more permissionless types of LRT projects.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And what is now open source at the foundation. So hopefully a lot of people can use it and make more LRTs in the future.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm seeing like two dimensions on which we can decentralize. We can decentralize at the LRT level, and then that's great news. Open sourcing code is how we get things more permissionless. And so that helps a lot at the restaking level. And so at the operator level, what can be done to further lower the entry barriers so that we can have some more permissionless, even if it's not fully permissionless, but how
Yeah, I mean, anyone can run an operator on EigenLayer right now. I think the way you make it more attractive for different groups of network participants is by actually having incentives on chain, which we are planning. More carrots in the system as opposed to sticks, and having more standardization in place as well. So, making sure key management is easier, depending on the network that you want to run, of selected actors that are really sophisticated. But if decentralization is more of a mind.
And is it similar in Milky? How low is the barrier of entry when it comes to being an operator?
It's going to be permissionless, so completely up to the AVS to decide in terms of how strict they want it to be.
Awesome.
Because it's the AVS that would choose in terms of the operators that they want to secure them.
Okay. Okay, maybe. But first, let's bring the liquid staking portion of this kind of more forefront. So, taking EigenLayer as an example, everyone can kind of spin up an eigenpod and stake their ETH in that, or commit it directly to an LRT. And so for the liquid staking projects on the of these liquid restaking projects, what observations have you made and what adjustments have you had to make in your business models to sort of understand that these LRTs exist now? What changes have you had to make to adapt LRT projects?
T's and Cosmos yet.
None for now. Yeah, I think for Cosmos it's kind of early, let's say. Not sure if we're going to see a future when people kind of combine these two models together, or if they're going to be separated in two, which is kind of yet to be seen as well. Could both and people specialize in there's LST that then provides collateral to LRTs and so on. Yeah, but for us it's
I think that's all right. For Cosmos today, it's not really that impacted by LRTs, but I think we have seen a lot of action LRTs on Ethereum, and I think the natural inclination is eventually we're going to see that in other ecosystems like Solana or Cosmos, or how this might affect users. And I think it raises kind of an interesting dichotomy between LSTs and LRTs. That serves two purposes. One is you secure the chain, you are contributing to the economic security of the chain, and the second is that you can earn yield with these tokens. Now you can go deploy them elsewhere. And there are users that care about both of these, but in my experience, I think most users care predominantly about the second one. And the state or safe types of yield, but the source of that yield or the benefits of it, some people care about it, but it's not 100%. And it's mostly, it's somewhat hard to compare the yield of an LRT and it's unclear what the actual net yield will end up being. LST is obviously I would imagine relatively soon we're going to move to a world where LRT yields are also more definitive, and then you get this weirdness where LRT yield might be higher or lower than LST yield. Will they go to the one that they understand better, like LST is maybe a little more understandable? LRTs might be more the type of yield you get might be more novel. You might prioritize that, or you might be like, hey, I really like this DeFi application, I want to go use that LRT. But I think we're going to start seeing a fracturing. Right now, it's basically the market for. It's not obvious to me what's going to happen. Is it that LSTs, LRTs have to combine? Everyone has to do both. Everyone has to be whatever is the maximal yield. Will it be oh, there's one token, this is going to be the safest yield. This one's going to be the riskiest yield. How are we actually going to go into that fragmentation? Because the dimensionality of staking tokens now is 10xing.
Actually, point. So for us, since we're building the first restaking platform on the Cosmos and modular ecosystem, token issuance on top of our restaking platform, but that will be another company doing. Because since we're doing Tia, and then so it's going to be Tia, Milky, DTIA, and then so it's actually a great way for. And then because they get one LRT regardless of which token they input it. So in some way it's a great way to see it as consolidation of the fragmentation, and then apart from the restaking yield on top of it when they hold the liquid restaking token.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of no staking these things on top of each other and then getting all the benefits possible. I think that's a hot space, right?
Yeah, I realize it's one step at a time. Potential restaking collateral. And so I imagine a world where we could have some liquid staking tokens that are interest bearing as collateral economic security for AVSs. What is kind of like, if you wanted to jump in, yeah.
Isn't it happening already though? I think that as well now. So it's yeah.
Yeah, Symbiotic and EigenLayer will support all ERC20s. So
Awesome. When you're considering like an appropriate token for economic stake of your chain, like what are some of the factors that you consider?
I mean, the degenerate in me is like anyone can do whatever they want. So I think starting out with ETH is like, setting the tone, right? Like this is this universal asset. The main difference between for our reasons versus their reasons, we're choosing the ability to natively restake ETH on EigenLayer. But that maybe apply to a broader group of AVSs could be something that you can create an LRT on as well. So I would like to see people just go crazy,
For Milky Way as well, we're going to do a multi-asset. There are other blue chip assets apart from TIA, but actually one of the pain points that we see the most in terms of the AVSs or projects that we're working with is a lot of them actually don't want rented security in the beginning, right? And they only do it because, and that's why they need to, rent security from some other token. But eventually they do want to be secured by their own token. So what we do is like we have this like programs where they can switch in terms of the assets they then after the token launch, since it's relatively low market cap, it might be like 5% their own token, 95% TIA, and then as their token grows in market cap, then it's like, gradually till it's 100%, and then they no longer need to rent security. So that's how we see it, and a lot of projects like this approach, yeah.
I think to make it or any yield-bearing asset and any reward that you're receiving from your AVS selection, so representation on chain as well. Restaking on 100 different AVSs, and one token or one AVS is giving you like $10. Touch that token, but if there's a representation of the entire stake position, you can actually let.
Okay, and so how are you thinking about allocation in these mechanisms? Like, is there, like you said, if you're going to rebalance your position across all these different AVSs, for different yield reasons, right? That's going to cost that you foresee.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Rio, what we were selling, right, is like the strategy manager role. And I think over time, once more sticks enter the system, once people do start getting slashed and they see that, potentially, right, like maybe necessarily doing that risk management part, that's going to be a huge marketing lever for any LRT. You need to do that on the technical side as well. Like, how many do you want to like do selection on a monthly or quarterly basis? And then you also like want to have input from your governance token holder community, because maybe saying the quiet part out loud, but a lot of LRT vehicles are like on-chain asset managers, and so how do you make sure that your regulators are like, okay, that's good enough.
Makes sense. Zooming out a bit and kind of considering like the duality of man that we have here, like these two ecosystems look very different. When we're thinking about this liquid staking on the verge of restaking in Cosmos, and then we see the paradigm on Ethereum. Generally, what are the two states in like the current present moment of each industry? How do they differ? And then do we generally see those converging to differentiating those two ecosystems going forward?
You mean liquid staking and restaking conversion, or Cosmos and Ethereum conversion?
The state.
Everything converging.
I generally mean Cosmos.
I think there is some convergence that has been happening from the perspective of like Cosmos. Cosmos started the idea of app chains, and then this idea is kind of let's say having difficulties from fragmentation because it pioneered the app chain idea, and now these difficulties are kind of in the L2 space as well. So I think if you look at it overall, these two ecosystems started from two very different places. Actually, pretty interesting to observe, and I'm excited about the fact that Cosmos, because it had all these challenges from the beginning for cross-chain swaps and what Squid is doing for the same. It's pretty amazing, and like people when they're coming from the Ethereum world or like outside of Cosmos world in general, they're pretty excited about like this has been solved. So yeah, I think there's a lot that people can learn from the Cosmos path and kind of apply this in Ethereum or some of the other ecosystems as well. Yeah, that's really good to see.
There's like a slight difference in maybe like mission or what people think of when they think of Ethereum and Cosmos, and they are converging definitely to some extent. My loose sense is I think there is like a slight difference in what people think of these ecosystems for and what kind of niche they're going to fill. Ethereum, I feel like, is in my mind mostly geared around ecosystem prop up ETH and like how far can we go in this concept of take this really big asset and build these really interesting primitives on top of it. And there's all sorts of really great research on Ethereum, but in my mind, because it's more institutionally focused, more around changes that are made are very thoughtful and very impactful. Like there's rolled out to hundreds of thousands or millions of users, but it feels more slow moving, more geared around how can you make this really big institution that can treat ETH as money. And if you look at all sorts of projects in Ethereum, they all have kind of like socially agreed upon ETH as being their unit of currency. Or a unit of domination, and you take back to ETH fundamentally. For Cosmos, I think the driving goal is more sovereignty and experimentation, as well as giving apps. We see many more Cosmos chains, many more Cosmos chain failures because there's more experimentation. Also, many more interesting successes, like to your point, Skip, very interesting success, totally novel use case. Something we really have not seen before, and probably would have taken like 2 years of writing EIPs to do this on Ethereum, but rolled out in just a few months with a relatively small engineering team in Cosmos. I think we're going to keep seeing that in Cosmos. You have so much more freedom and flexibility, experimentation on the consensus layer, on the application layer, on the bridging layer, etc. But then also, I think for Cosmos, we're also, or one step back, L1 for distribution of their own product. So you look at most applications on Ethereum, the main value they get from being on Ethereum is they can tap into the user base and infrastructure that exists there. And for just given the state of crypto today, there aren't that many users. And so it matters a lot that you can tap into that have their own distribution, that have their own users independent of their own L1. Good example of this, DYDX. They're started on Ethereum, but their brand and their presence is built up such a point where users think of DYDX as a separate application. And then for those kind of apps, I think it makes capture more value, you can build more bespoke apps. I suspect we're going to keep seeing this sort of delineation where you see apps that are bigger, want to capture more value, move to the Cosmos type model, and apps that need more experimentation, and apps that want to tap into this global network of money and need really large amounts of distribution or need large amounts of capital will keep building on Ethereum.
Absolutely.
Quickly, because I think Vishal started an interesting topic about like level of experimentation. just for the record, I think so. We're working on like LSTs, LRTs in the space. I think with 3 completely different into a rollup soon, right? We're building an integrated app based on smart contracts, building a kind of from very different perspective, kind of similar tools for the end user. So I think that's a continuum of architectures that Cosmos enables is pretty.
To your point, distribution, and if you can tap into the distribution network effects, you end up with some significant firepower that you can have for your project. And then there's some different environments that have some different network effects for their ecosystems. I also think that there's going to be some projects that already have distribution adoption and graduated to their app chain. Projects may come in from Web 2 or TradFi land and leapfrog all of that, already have distribution, off chain, and then put all of that on chain and create their own sovereignty that way. And so generally, when you're thinking about network effects and how you can Ethereum, EigenLayer, AVS ecosystem, like what are the network effects that you see present in your ecosystems, and then how can you help spread projects that are building in each of these ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, any AVS right now, it's totally their go-to-market way of building. I think Cosmos chains as well. They want to, ride that wave together. I think the interesting thing when you're talking about such a universal asset like Ethereum is DeFi AVSs can, get a lot of kickbacks from running the underlying infrastructure for the AVS as well, as an operator. And so you do kind of have this flywheel where it's actually beneficial to be here and get that like transaction flow kickback. But you can also do in the Cosmos, how you do it at scale, where there's a lot of AVS that you may be using, and then there's these sort of agreements either on chain or off chain that like do benefit you to stay for any ecosystem, because DYDX is a great example. Once they realized that there was no way for them to give value back to their token holder community, they needed to go find something else to build on.
Yeah, Vishal made a great point in terms of in Cosmos, because they're attracted to the flexibility of the tech stack, and then that's why they want to experiment and launch projects on, right? But then for them, obviously, the security decide to build a restaking platform because it's quite hard for them to connect to Eigen, for example, because of different languages essentially. And for them, when we told them about the whole multi-asset approach, they're actually super excited because in their own words, they're like, oh, cool. So basically these group of like early supporters, they provide security to us, and then when our token launch, then it's going to drive a lot of hype potentially, because for example, like we can give them some discounted rate to purchase or do some activity with them. So in some way, they really fascinating. And I was like, okay, that's a nice way to see it. We never thought of ourselves as a launch pad, but then if it's good and it kind of drives the community and the DeFi ecosystem, then I think it's going to be great for the community.
Yeah, totally agree. Take and maybe one more criticism of Cosmos. I think the general way that most ecosystems have agreed network effects, like the most valuable one is agreeing a unit of account. Like Ethereum, everyone takes ETH, and then there's not really that much coordination needed on projects from that point on. Like everyone just agrees to build on ETH. They give up a little bit of value curls around token, but as a result, they give so much value to ETH that it drives a ton of usage to the overall ecosystem. Somewhere in Solana, like it's not really obvious. It just grows the whole space. Maybe one additional network effect that exists elsewhere is like shared application state. So like Radium, for example, can look at Jupyter application state, or like Pump Fund can look at someone else's application state. They're all shared. Both these are not really present in Cosmos today, and I think it's part of the difficulty why it's been a little harder to drive similar network effects in Cosmos. We do share users, but unit account is not shared, and application state is quite hard to share as well. So it's really hard to have applications that plug into an application on like X chain and Y chain as well, just because reading the data is harder. And the fact that everyone is it gives a smaller shelling point for little space. And I don't have a great solution to this, and I think it's something Cosmos is kind of grappling with right now. But I think it's one thing that's holding back the space is that we haven't yet found a way to kind of build really great network effects with all these sovereign chains. But I think it's possible. We all have a lot of shared incentives. We're building very similar things. A lot of the users are a little bit of discovery on what that right mechanism is.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing in Cosmos that is just how native staking ended up working for most of the Cosmos chains. And I think it was implemented so well that now it's a problem. So it's like in Ethereum, it's so difficult to become to work as a validator. You have to have 32 ETH, you have to spin your own infrastructure, so that for everyone it was just a natural solution to use LSTs. And then when the DeFi summer had happened already, so there was like a natural kind of thing, but when you just plug in your LST, boom, now it's a huge market. In Cosmos, what we have is that the native staking are high, inflation is high, so everyone is kind of incentivized to do just native staking, sit back and relax. And I think our kind of collective goal is to provide a very, very appealing alternative to this and unlock of liquidity for applications, rollups, whatever. And I think that's a huge problem to solve. Yeah, I think we have pretty cool teams that are working on this now. So I'm looking forward to working on this together.
Just to add to that, I think that the Cosmos ecosystem like natively incentivizes, like, for example, and Ethereum kind of like natively through its very, very big DeFi ecosystem, on top of just the fact that native staking is so complex and needs to be abstracted, it incentivizes the user to go through like of your native like rewards, you're going to get also DeFi yield.
How do the yields compare when you're talking about native staking in Cosmos? 'Cause I think I'm generally aware of how it works in Ethereum, but in Cosmos, how does it work? Or how do those yields compare between liquid staking and native staking?
It's amazing.
Is that a good thing?
No, I actually, yeah, that's, I mean, it's amazing for if you want to be kind of passive and like sit back and relax. I think it's not great if you look at it, how easy it is to incentivize the user to do something else with it. And that's kind of
So they should still put their TIA in our protocols and then get that 11% and whatever they get on DeFi.
I think so not trying to as well. I think anyone that is releasing a highly volatile asset and a very like burgeoning but nascent industry should at least target a yield.
Yeah, on Bitcoin there's no yield.
Well, yeah.
I heard someone say yet. That's what I was going for. Okay, that makes sense as far as the network effects and staking and restaking. And so, we talked about kind of the network effects in each of these ecosystems. When it comes to restaking specifically, there's network effects that we get in addition because this restaking yield. But that also comes with a trade-off because we have shared security a lot of times. And I'm case, but when it comes to shared security, Tarun Chitra from Gauntlet gave a talk about this at Modular Summit and basically talked through the contagion risk of a particular economic security if there was some economic security system that we're also sharing security of that pool. And so I'm curious from the restaking projects up here, how what steps can we take to mitigate that, if any, and how are you seeing this in theory or in practice?
Again, with not trying to control everything, making recommendations on what ABSs would slash, right? I mean, again, going back to the carrots and sticks, if an ABS looks like the slashing condition, revenue sources for me, if I'm like running infrastructure on ABSs, that ABS probably is going to get a lot of quality operators on the network. And so I think the market will kind of play itself out without us needing to worry about that too much. But again, if we're not worrying about it, that's when the contagion happens. Investors are going to have some form of, at least in EigenLayer, what we're thinking about right now is attributable security, as opposed to total pooled security. So there wouldn't necessarily be an event where 100% of someone's stake on an operator is slashed by again, that's just how we're thinking about this over time. But yeah, I mean, you want to create systems where there's not an over incentive of stretching your infrastructure too thin as well. As there's generally two times when stuff messes up on chain. One is during the bull market, where there's just so much flash actors can aggregate a lot of capital and start spending this stuff up, and they mess up. The other is in a bear market when you're trying to cut costs as well. You're used to running it; it's just they're losing money by maintaining that infrastructure. I think right now in the restaking ecosystem as a whole, not just EigenLayer, we need to be thinking about how we pay people first, and then start thinking about how we punish them later. So that's my two satoshis there.
Yes, so this contagion risk and also the slashing is actually a huge problem, obviously, where we shouldn't dictate in terms of the slashing rules and also the rewards distribution and the assets, etc. So on the slashing front, obviously there's the traditional kind of burn slashing, which I think everyone's quite scared of. It's like, just burn, that's the ultimate death penalty, it's gone, right? But even in the law, right, like it's not just you break the law and then you die, right? And then there's like, variations of punishments. And then so we're like, okay, that should kind of be the same as well, right? It should be down to the AVS to choose, you commit this well for Milky Way. So we're starting with 3 different types of slashing rules. So there is obviously the traditional death penalty of the burn slashing, but there's also the stake slash, which is basically it get redistributed to other operators. So from the user's perspective, their rewards is exactly very important. And then the third is actually the jail slash, which is just downtime. So the principal amount of the restaked will also never be touched. It will just be a little bit less rewards received. So that's how we're seeing it. And obviously we'll get, add more and more slashing rules as we evolve.
Yeah, what's also interesting for punishing maybe operators and LRTs as opposed to stakers is you are aggregating all of these reward sources under. If you get perma jailed as someone whose job it is to aggregate all of this under like a single operator address, you would have to unwind all those pieces of infrastructure that you're running on all these different in the Cosmos ecosystem, to where if you get perma jailed on a network, it's just okay, that one's done. I can just turn on another one fairly quickly. And then the risk of like watching your TVL like bleed out is significant enough.
And Josie, you mentioned like 3 different types of slashing. EigenLayer doesn't have slashing yet, but when you're thinking about slashing, are those 3 types of slashing still the types of the slashing types in theory?
Yeah, like double sign events and downtime. But a lot of these decentralized networks may not necessarily be blockchains over time. So that's when this sort of intersubjective work token, for anything deemed bad. But know, you can't do it like automatically because there does need to be some sort of governance in place with that.
Okay. I think that's a good segue into the next question here. A dumb question. And so there's like this like economic security is a meme thing that floats around sometimes, and it comes in waves. ZK is real, kinda, and so like, you know, if everything is like has the potential to be cryptographically proven by ZK or some other cryptographic proof, do we need crypto economic security?
Well, I think you can definitely the interplay, and you probably need less once you have ZK. But they feel like they fit different niches. Like you want ZK security to know, like, given these set of rules. And the way I think of economic security in general is like, can the rules themselves be redefined? And oftentimes you do want, like, sometimes you're just like, no, the rules will never get redefined, which case you're doing economic security, or you just deploy on like some smart contract. Oftentimes you do want like changing rules, you want some ability to upgrade, and then like how do you define that? And that's often economic security. But I do agree. I think it's we probably have too much economic security, and it's a little bit of a meme.
I mean, you're talking to like a large traditional institution that's not here yet at all, but is like willing to talk to like, you know, the Coinbases of the world or something. They care about that number, which is interesting. You know, it's like how much assets are staked on this network that you're trying to sell to this, right? So even if it's just like a vanity number, that's interesting for those, you know, more boring people who have to care about a lot of stuff. But then also too on, you know, just what the assets represent, like proof of work versus proof of, you know, distribute incentives so people are actually just holding the token as well while taking on some sort of risk. And you do like lose that if you're not, you know, having some sort of staking layer as well.
Cool.
For us, not saying the programmable, where we let the ABSs choose in terms of how much security they need, essentially. Because we had, you know, some that's like, okay, we don't on their platform, right? But we also speak with, you know, DeFi dApps where they do, you know, margin trading and lending, etc. Where for them, when they speak to those institution clients, like Clayton mentioned, then it would be like, okay, I want to match dollar for dollar security. So it really depends. And also there's like, you know, other protocols out there like block. So I think that's also, you know, another good way to use it.
Maybe in the goal of being a little bit spicy, I'm talking about why I think it's a little bit of a meme. Economic security in particular, why it's a bit of a meme. I think security matters stake, just because it's easy to interpret, and it's also the biggest number you can come up with. So you're like easy to tell someone, hey, I have $100 billion. Like the weakest link, it's the minimum across all things you have. So Nakamoto, for example, one example, like how many operators you have to bribe or blackmail or give a subpoena to cause them to change their operations. That's often much easier than actually acquiring all the stake required to upseat those operators. There's also things like how secure are my operators in general? Like, are they all in the same AWS cluster? And actually, I just have to subpoena Amazon, and now like all the security of this network is gone. There's lots of different ways to look at security, and so operator diversity and being a bug in those nodes, all these things matter. And for what's worth, I think everyone on the stage recognizes that, and I think everyone on the stage has spent a lot of time thinking about like which validators delegate to, or operators delegate to. How do you incentivize good operations by those operators? And that definitely hits on all these aspects of security attack vectors. It's just annoying, it's challenging, I think, because it's hard to communicate this really high-dimensional problem to the public, being like, oh, there's a 10-point state a little bit too much on just this raw number of economic security.
Yeah, I like that take. And, you know, we're running low on time, but we had 45 minutes for this panel, which I thought was going to be plenty, but for some reason, because it leads to an interesting question of like, how do we price this economic security? And I think you point to a lot of factors that are important. It's not just about the amount, it's about the quality quality of that economic security, which is not always the same. And so I think this is true of like liquid staking and liquid restaking. 20 seconds, maybe we'll go like a minute or two over, but yeah, like how do we price economic security? You know, let's that'll be our final question, and then any closing thoughts.
I mean, I think this leads to economic security being a meme, right? It's like, but if you don't need a specific number, right? You know, I think, you know, Ethereum like should have a lot, right? But if you're, you know, a product market fit, you could probably just be more open with like, this is how much money we're going to give to our operator set. If you want to be restaking here, I guess, because there's too much people doing it. And then some people won't like that, and that, like that ETH will, you know, come out of the system. So I think just there's going to be marketplace dynamics, and people are going to price this some sort of way, and willing to take the risk based on, you know, the basket that they're choosing as a restaking strategy over time.
Yeah, I think when rewards go live on EigenLayer, for example, if we start seeing like 15% APY going sent to restakers, and at the contrary level, like if we start seeing like 0.1%, for example, we're going to see like massive outflows. So I think that security and rewards will always like reach an equilibrium, which is
I want to see a project that does leveraging economic security on a transaction level. So I have very important transaction. I want to have a lot of economic security for this one, just to find the right price.
We call those ephemeral rollups. Okay. Yeah. Closing thoughts.
Yeah. Maybe just answering the question on price economic security. Totally agree with these takes. And I suspect we will see like different products might. Some products might have to pay more because people don't trust their token. Products going to pay less. But maybe one kind of meta observation. I think right now, historically, there's been very few ways to pay for security. One option, or you had one option. If you're in like a regular L2 or something, you had one option. And so people only have this notion of like how many dollars you're paying for security. Now, a lot of the work that everyone on this panel is doing is like ways to expand the optionality of projects to pay for security. And I think really one option, like how many dollars do I pay? How many dollars security I want? But I think the security most projects care about is quite. I think Stride might care about how many unique operators do I have, or what to express this preference today. But I think we're quickly going to move to a world where projects can express their preferences and what they want to pay. Like, I actually just don't really want to pay them anymore. Like, if I want to pay more for security, I want other validators. And I think projects can start specifying, like, I care about having at least not going to coefficient of 5. I want 3 different countries. And then, like, you're paid for whichever one of those things you're not meeting. And a lot of the work people are doing on restaking, for example, allows for these more complex preferences. And I think something we're also working on drastically overpay for security, and also don't really get the kind of security that's actually best for their chain.
There's less of a premium, I think, for receiving ETH as a reward token, or like stablecoin, right? Because a premium to node operators, because they've been running infrastructure for 8 years. And it's like I've experienced a token going down 90%, early on, because I want to continue supporting this network when it's like bad. So you could probably pay less for security if you're just paying them in stablecoin.
After this, so until Seb comes up here and kicks us off, which might happen any second. Okay. Well, I think that might have just happened. I don't know. If you want to go real quick, I don't know. I'm gonna get slashed.
Point, I think people should rationally pay or want to get paid more for like volatile tokens. Although I feel like part of what we're seeing in this current meta with points, for example, is that there's almost like a risk, not premium, risk discount. willing to take a lower expected yield for this upside. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I mean, as a staker, right, you're not really doing anything. You're I mean, there's opportunity cost elsewhere for potential future yield of some other thing. Infrastructure providers have hard costs, but also, I mean, upside is. And so we are going to make a bet. We are going to devote, people to it, hardware, we're going to, sell it to institutional audience, large validators, or even, 10-person, 20-person teams. They need to, factor that in.
Actually, just one last thing. Yeah, in terms of the price fluctuation, because they're like, a lot of coins are stable, but they're still not stable coins, right? And then so how's it going to work if we get the security rules is actually for the multi-asset approach. They can set that, okay, if this price, drops this percentage and it or it's completely switch to stables, for example, as a part of our approach. Yep.
Very dynamic. Okay. The end. Thank you, everybody.
And I'm sorry to rush you.
Good stuff.